Tonight, we're going inside the invisible engine that truly runs our modern world. You're about to see a story of incredible tech, of high-stakes power plays, and a global race for control that's heating up right now.
So, just think about that for a second. What on earth could possibly connect the phone in your hand, the most advanced fighter jet on the planet, and our entire green energy future? What's the one thing they all depend on? Well, the answer isn't oil, and it's not data. It all comes down to a group of 17 quirky elements on the periodic table called rare earths, and they are, quite literally, the secret ingredient, the invisible architecture of the 21st century economy.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at what these minerals are. Then, how one country came to dominate them. Third, what happens when that supply chain gets turned into a weapon. And finally, how the rest of the world is now scrambling to fight back and innovate its way to safety.
You see, we've quietly entered a totally new age. We're shifting from a world that was intensive on fuel to one that is intensive on minerals. It's the wild magnetic and optical properties of these rare earth elements, or REEs, that make them absolutely critical for everything from the powerful magnets in wind turbines and electric cars to the precision tech that polishes the most advanced semiconductors.
But here's the thing. The story of rare earths is a story of extreme, almost unbelievable concentration. And, this didn't just happen by accident. Nope. This was the result of decades of very deliberate industrial strategy, creating a level of market control you almost never see.
It all starts at the very beginning, right at the source. In 2024, China mines almost 70% of the world's rare earths. But here's the kicker. That number, as high as it seems, is actually the least concentrated part of the entire supply chain. It gets much, much tighter.
Because this is where the real power is. See, digging the ore out of the ground is one thing, but separating those 17 elements, which are all chemically tangled up with each other, into super pure materials, well, that's a costly, complex, and dirty chemical process. And right here, China's control leaps to a staggering 90%. This is the ultimate choke point.
And if you zoom in even further on the most valuable heavy rare earths, we're talking about elements like dysprosium and terbium, which are vital for high-performance magnets that have to work in extreme heat, like in a jet engine, well, that control becomes a near-total monopoly, 99%. That gives you immense leverage over the entire global defense and EV industries.
Now, for you data folks, economists actually have a way to measure this. It's called the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, or HHI. Anything over 2,500 is considered a highly concentrated market. The rare earth market, it scores over 4,000. That is the textbook definition of a functional monopoly.
Okay, this slide just lays it all out. The dominance isn't in just one spot. It's a structural lock on the whole value chain. From mining, to separating, to making the final high-tech magnets. China controls around 90% or more of every single critical step. You could see the US there at about 11.5% for mining, but here's the problem. Without the ability to process it, that raw material still has to be shipped overseas.
So this massive concentration was always a risk, but in 2025, that risk became a reality. This is the moment the rare earth industry officially went from being a commercial asset to a primary tool of geopolitics, and it sent shockwaves through every high-tech company on the planet.
And the rollout was very deliberate. It was an escalating squeeze. It kicked off at April 2025 with licenses on just 7 key elements. By October, it was all 17. And this is crucial. They also restricted the technology and machinery needed to process them. You add in bureaucratic delays that can stretch out for 6 months, and what you have is a system that's just designed to create maximum uncertainty.
Now, you have to pay really close attention to this next concept. It's called extraterritorial reach. What this rule means is that a high-tech magnet made in Europe or a critical component for an F-35 made in the US now falls under Beijing's rules if it contains just a tiny fraction, 0.1% of Chinese-sourced rare earths. This is a massive shift in how global trade is regulated.
So what happened? The market absolutely freaked out. Prices for these critical materials didn't just go up, they went vertical. Yttrium jumped 600%. Dysprosium and terbium, which are essential for EV motors, saw huge triple-digit spikes. This is the kind of economic shock that forces entire industries to completely rethink their supply chains, from the ground up.
Now, a shock to the system that big was bound to trigger a massive response. And that's exactly what's happening. The United States and its allies have kicked off a radical, coordinated counteroffensive. The old era of just-in-time supply chains that only cared about cost It's over. Welcome to the new era of just-in-case resilience.
So the U.S. is leading with a strategy that attacks the problem from multiple angles. You've got Project Vault, this huge $12 billion plan to build up a strategic stockpile with the first major depot at an Army base in Nevada. And at the same time, it's building a new trading bloc with allied nations using tools like price floors to make sure new producers don't get pushed out of the market.
And over in Europe, you're seeing a very similar playbook. The EU's Critical Raw Materials Act sets some really aggressive goals for 2030. They want to mine 10% of their own needs, process 40%, and get 25% from recycling. This is all being coordinated through a new central agency and a whole web of partnerships with friendly countries.
And here's one to really keep an eye on: India. The country has massive reserves of its own, and it has launched this incredibly aggressive mission to build an entire domestic supply chain, from the mine all the way to the final magnet. India is positioning itself to become a major global alternative in this space over the next decade.
But let's be real, building new mines and refineries can take a decade or more. So while all that's happening, the other part of the race is all about technology. It's about finding clever ways to just leapfrog the problem entirely.
And this right here is probably the most exciting part. On one side, you have the conventional rare earth magnets we use today. They're powerful, but they're vulnerable. On the other side, you have this disruptive new tech, iron nitride magnets. These were developed with funding from the Pentagon, and they use cheap, abundant iron and nitrogen to potentially create magnets that are even stronger. This could create what some are calling a permanently secure supply chain. It's a total game changer.
The other big idea is creating a circular economy. Urban mining, pulling these valuable elements out of our e-waste and industrial sludge. The potential is absolutely massive, but the reality? It's really, really hard. Collection rates for magnets are currently below 15%, and the whole process is just technically complex and expensive.
And that brings us right back to the central challenge. This quote from the International Energy Agency really says it all. Even if the West and its allies manage to open up new mines all over the world, it solves nothing if you can't break that choke point in the middle, in the processing stage. That is, and remains, the key vulnerability.
So where does this all leave us? Well, it leads to a really profound question. Are we literally watching the global trading system get redesigned in real time? All the signs seem to be pointing to a world that's splitting in two, with two parallel supply chains, one that's geopolitically secure and trades at a premium, and another one that isn't. The big question we're left with is what that division is going to mean for all of us, for innovation, and ultimately for the price we all have to pay.